Today I'm going to take you through one of the best Season 1 Necromancer endgame builds that is focused purely on minions. This build will be able to take you through the capstone dungeon to unlock World Tier 4 and then start going into World Tier 4 Nightmare dungeons for endgame. This build does not rely on any unique items to get you started, but can be improved with them, which I will discuss later in the video. Now, this build is different to most builds that does not use a basic or core skill. The skill bar is purely focused on your minions and providing support through CC and damage. The first skill I'm using is Decrepify. Now, I have this skill on mainly to be able to send my minions in to start targeting the cursed enemies in order to start battles. Decrepify will also have a 10% chance to stun the enemies that are inflicted by the curse. So this helps target your minions against enemies and provides the chance to put some CC down through stun. The next skill I have is Corpse Tendrils, which you'll be using on corpses to slow and pull in enemies to group them together while also applying vulnerable. This is then paired with the other corpse skill I have on my skill bar, which is Corpse Explosion. When used on corpses, this skill will explode the corpse, releasing a miasma, which deals shadow damage over 10 seconds. This skill is converted to shadow damage over time by selecting the Blighted Corpse Explosion upgrade. Now we are going to make the most of these two corpse skills by pairing them with the Sacrilegious Heart, which when walking near a corpse, it will automatically activate an equipped corpse skill every second, dealing 40 to 30% reduced damage. This is going to continually proc for us in battle and be a key part of getting the best out of this build. For my ultimate skill, I've taken Army of the Dead. This is useful for two reasons, with the first being a way to resummon your minions without corpses in the unlikely event that is required, and the second main use is for some burst DPS. This Army of the Dead skill is paired with the Unyielding Commander's aspect, which means while Army of the Dead is active, your minions gain 70 to 100% attack speed and take 90% reduced damage. The last two skills on my bar are Raise Skeleton to ensure I can raise my warriors and mages, as well as giving them healing and damage buffs, and the other one being for my golem. Now, going into the gameplay and mechanics of how all this comes together, once you encounter a mob of enemies, the first thing you're doing is to use Decrepify to curse the enemies ahead of you so that your minions will start targeting them. You want to try and get the first couple of corpses to drop, which you will then automatically cast Corpse Tendrils on thanks to your Caged Heart, and corpses will start exploding, putting a blight on the ground, which will deal shadow damage over time. Once they are grouped together, you can continue to do damage using Corpse Explosion, and during the battle you also need to ensure that you're using the Raise Skeleton skill on corpses to heal your minions and buff their damage by 30% every 5 seconds, and your Golem skill when they're grouped together to do some AoE damage and to stun them. You will also be getting Essence whenever you consume a corpse thanks to the Grim Harvest passive, which will help support your energy regeneration. And then Army of the Dead can be used whenever there are large groups of enemies and elites for some burst damage to quickly take care of them. The key passive I've taken for this build is Shadow Blight, which is going to buff you and your minion damage by 10% that have Shadow Blight on them, and every 10th time it procs it will increase to 22% increased damage. 3 Caged Hearts I'm using are, the first one is Sacrilegious Heart, which we spoke about earlier, which will automatically activate a corpse skill on your bar every 1 second, just dealing a bit of reduced damage. The second one is the Vicious Heart Picana, which means critical strikes electrically charge enemies, which will cause lightning to arc between them and other charged enemies, causing lightning damage. This is very useful because we will be grouping large amount of enemies together, which will help proc and deal damage for us. In terms of the third heart, you have two choices depending on what you have access to. One being the Wrathful Heart, the Great Feast, which drains 1 to 2 of your essence per second, but increasing your minion damage by 75 to 100%. The essence drain won't impact you as much because the only skill you have on your skill bar that uses essence will be Decrepify. For the second option is the Wrathful Heart of Creeping Death, which increases your damage over time, and bosses will take increased stagger, which also pairs well with your Corpse Explosion skill. In terms of boss battles, you want to use Decrepify so that your minions target it straight away, then use Corpse Tendrils to apply vulnerable, and then Army of the Dead so that your minions start doing bulk damage. Then just continue supporting them with Corpse Explosion for your own damage. For the Book of the Dead, the first one I've chosen is Reapers, so that they have a 15% chance to carve a corpse off enemies. This works well with your build, which needs as many corpses as possible. In terms of mages, you'll want to stick to Shadow Mages, as the shadow damage will synergize very well with other skills and passives chosen in this build, and for the modifier, take the one that has a chance to stun the enemies. Next you'll want to pick the Iron Golem and the modifier that allows it to do a shockwave attack for every 4th attack. This works well with the build when you're grouping large amounts of enemies together with corpse tendrils. Now in terms of aspects, the main ones you're going to be doing is 2 for damage mitigation, 2 for increasing your minion numbers, and the rest are focused on buffing the damage for you and more importantly your minions. Here's all the aspects that I'm using in this build. Now this build is not reliant on having the Ring of Mendelin to pair with your minions. However, once it does drop, you can swap it out with one of your rings that has the aspect of the Frenzied Dead on it. Now in terms of the skill tree, I've linked the build in the description, so have a look to see what the skill distribution is, and you can take a closer look at the aspects used and the points used on the first 2 Paragon boards. Do remember to hit the like button for the video and also subscribe for more content from my channel.